All right, welcome everyone to this exciting webinar around public cloud data protection. My name is Mike Lose. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager for the VCSP program here, and I'm joined by Tim Hudson, Senior Solutions Architect for our VCSP community. Tim, a few opening words from you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike. I'm thrilled to be here with everyone in attendance today and watching this webinar in the future. I'm particularly excited to talk about public cloud data protection as a use case, as a comprehensive solution for our service providers and their customers. I'm really thrilled with what we put together today, Mike.
Awesome, yeah, same here, man. All right, so first we're going to jump into just a couple of housekeeping notes here, making sure that the slides catch up. All right, so everyone was automatically muted upon entry. So if you do have a question, please use that Q&A chat function in the GoToWebinar console. And we're going to try to do our best during the presentation to answer those questions, but we're going to have some time at the end to answer those in real time as well. We will be sharing the recording and the slides following the presentation, and those are going to be sent to that email address that you used to register. All right, so just a quick look at the agenda here. This webinar is going to be a little different from the technical webinars that you're probably used to. We're not going to jump right in and be super tech heavy, but we are going to talk about the use cases, as Tim mentioned, as a whole, and then some market trends to reinforce why we're so heavily focused on public cloud. So first, we're going to take a look at an introduction around public cloud data protection, and then we're going to jump into some trends, like I just mentioned, around hybrid cloud and just cloud in general. Talk about the architecture, get into Veeam Service Provider Console, and we'll explain that a little bit further along in the presentation. We're gonna have some demos, we'll talk about some resources and some guidance for everybody, and then we'll have that Q&A session at the end. All right. So first, I just want to give a little background on the primary use cases for our Veeam service providers that they leverage to create those revenue generating services. And some of you on the call that have been with Veeam for a while are probably very familiar with these use cases. But for those of you that may be new to Veeam, I just want to run through these really quickly. So we developed these use cases roughly around 3 years ago, just based on the service offerings that our providers were building for their customers. And so starting on the left here, on the left-hand side, so service provider data protection and MSP backup. Service provider data protection, that's all about protecting those virtual workloads that are running within your IaaS environments, right, inside your cloud. So customers that are hosting their virtual machines within your data center can be intrinsically backed up with Veeam, utilizing Veeam backup and replications like deep integrations with VMware Cloud Director. And then MSP backup, that's all about backing up those customer workloads that reside on premises at their location and really utilizing Veeam Service Provider Console for that one. And then moving to the right with offsite backup and disaster recovery as a service, this is really based around our Cloud Connect technology, and that allows our service providers to offer either a simple offsite repository via Veeam Cloud Connect backup, or offer a complete disaster recovery as a service offering with that Cloud Connect replication technology that we introduced. I don't know, Tim, what would you say? Probably, was it 2014? I think Cloud Connect started hitting the market.
Yeah, it was in the second version of Cloud Connect as far as I recall.
Yeah, exactly. So we have those two in the middle, and then as we move to the right, I've highlighted the one that we're going to focus heavily on today, public cloud data protection. And then underneath that, we see SaaS data protection. Right now, that's really focused on backing up Microsoft 365 workloads. But coming soon in the future, in the next couple of versions, we're going to be adding Salesforce to that too. So these are the 6 use cases that we have put together for our service providers to leverage and go to market with. But like I said before, we're really going to be focusing on this public cloud data protection use case. So give that a second to catch up on my side. All right, so we're calling that the star of the show today, public cloud data protection. And the reason why there's such a big focus on this right now is, it's a hybrid world. Data's being created everywhere and extending into these public clouds, AWS and Azure, and even some into Google Cloud. I'm not going to spend too much time with the marketing stuff on this slide, but Tim, what are your thoughts from a technical perspective on how much focus we have on this use case right now?
Yeah, for the group as a whole, this is one of our newer use cases. It's one of our more modern use cases in that it really leverages these Veeam backup for public cloud pieces of software. And when I think about this use case and our focus on this use case, we know there's some changes coming in the future. We'll do some compare and contrast today. And Mike, when I think about the use case, even though this is a technical focused webinar and a very technical resource, I know lots of our audience are technical folks too, but this use case is a combination of Veeam software products that you as service providers leverage. And so I'm just, as we go into the trends and we talk about these, pieces of technology being in the data center or in a public cloud, the use case itself is our way to deliver the service as a whole. I'm just, really excited about the pieces of tech we'll jump to.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this use case too, I know a while back we had, most of our service providers, or I would say a lot of them, were also offering those infrastructure as a service offerings to their customers. And sometimes they look at the public cloud as a little bit of a competitor, right? Or a big competitor, depending on what scale they were providing the service as. And we've kind of changed that a little bit. And I'm going to get into why we've change that just in a couple of these slides coming up, just to kind of back some data to back up where cloud workloads are going and stuff like that. But service providers are starting to see the cloud as not so much as an enemy, but a little bit more of a friendly adversary when you look at hybrid infrastructure. And that kind of brings us into the data that we collected in our data protection trends report over this past year. And as you can see here on the left-hand side, the data center is not dying, but there is definitely a shift to the hyperscale clouds and putting data into these environments, running workloads in these environments, running applications in these environments. And it's kind of a gradual decline over the next couple of years. And then as you see into 2024, a gradual incline into those hyperscale environments. And this next one here is kind of built out a little bit of a narrative around these cloud hosted and this is what a cloud first strategy looks like for a lot of these customers out there, putting a lot of applications into the cloud, but also trying to find the best place and the most cost optimized, most resource optimized place to host these applications and run them. And that's why we're running into this hybrid infrastructure where workloads are kind of just everywhere. Nobody's just pinpointing one place to put these workloads. Would you agree with that, Tim, or do you got another perspective on that at all?
No, I mean, this is what we see today. This explains the use case that we'll get into in a second, where, when Veeam started to develop our software to take care of this scenario for our service providers, it is in a hybrid, situation that we see these customers having driven into over time, not as an instantaneous change. And I think we'll see how the use case and the technology leverage reflects that for today's world.
Yeah. Yeah, and then this one here, this comes out of the same report, but what I like about this graph here, this, I guess we'll call it a circle graph, is that we're moving away from organizations really relying on those built-in capabilities where they thought, well, I'm in the cloud, I'm in AWS, I'm in Azure, I don't have to back up my data because they're doing it for me. But with a lot of talk around shared responsibility models and all these other things that are out there, folks are realizing that their data is not safe just because it's in the cloud, right? They have to put in those tools and those processes in place to make sure that the data is protected. And a lot of them are turning to the third-party backup solutions for these VMs and for these applications, for these workloads. And they're going to third-party vendors like Veeam that offer more than just, hey, we backed up your data, you're good, right? They're looking at more data portability, migration, things of these natures, what they can do with the data once it's stored, right? They can refactor that data, monetize that data. There's all kinds of stuff they can do with it. And they're leaning towards a lot of these vendors that offer just more than, check the box, it's backed up, hopefully it's backed up, right? And turning to managed service providers to really help leverage the expertise and sort of create a force multiplier, if you would, to their company, and leveraging the expertise of the service providers to really augment that backup strategy. So we're going to jump into the architecture here, and I call it the as a service architecture because we got a couple of really good diagrams that have been created throughout the past couple of months just on our side that we really spells out the architecture of public cloud data protection and how it can be used in your environment. So Tim, I'm going to hand this one over to you since you're the technical guy.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. All right, so when I think about public cloud data protection and what Veeam has done to deliver just traditional backup and recovery in the public cloud, it's with tools like Veeam Backup for AWS, Veeam Backup for Azure, Veeam Backup for Google Cloud, okay? In today's conversation, in terms of architecture, I'm going to focus on AWS and Azure, as they're the most mature use cases where we've focused most of our efforts up to today. What I have on screen is a simple screenshot. This is Veeam Backup for AWS's landing page with an overview of what I'm backing up and provisioned to perform those backups in AWS today. We can see some workloads that I've created snapshots and backups for. We've got some history and information. This is the tool set that will demonstrate today to do what I typically refer to as the quote unquote work. Veeam Backup for AWS and Veeam Backup for Azure are going to be the tools where we create policies, repositories, perform these backup jobs and tasks, and get our initial status monitoring is through this tool. And what's most important is that this tool is a cloud native piece of software. In particular, Veeam Backup for AWS is going to live in AWS. Veeam Backup for Azure is going to be deployed and live in Azure. Okay. Now, while these tools are so important, it's valuable to just take a second and step back and think of this use case holistically. So I'm going to talk through this picture. Like Mike said, we've got a couple of really great diagrams. These were created by our good friend and colleague, Ivan Kochemasov. Ivan has created 2 quick start guides for this use case, one for AWS public cloud data protection, and another quick start guide for Azure data protection for you as service providers. We've got some details in our resource links later. That's where you'll find these diagrams. So let's walk through it. Hopefully you can tell that we're looking at 2 different tenants in Amazon. Hopefully you can also see the difference between what we call a production account and a backup account. Using these VPCs in Amazon is our traditional deployment strategy for safety and security of the Veeam Backup for AWS appliance and its storage pieces. What we see on the left side of the diagram are workloads, EC2 instances, RDS instances, EFS instances. And what Veeam Backup for AWS is going to do is perform some snapshots and backup processing for these particular environments and workloads. So if that covers the Amazon piece in the middle, I then want to turn kind of to the right side of the slide where you see the backup and replication icons and the Veeam Service Provider console icon. So today's use case, what we have built, you'll find all of this information in our documents and our quick start guides, Veeam really has been focused on the hybrid cloud type of scenario for our customers. Yes, we have these cloud native appliances, but we have specifically built a plugin based architecture for Veeam backup and replication to integrate with these appliances. I have two customers on screen. I have two backup and replication servers on screen. Right? Each of these are owned by a customer. And then finally, on the far right, you see the service provider console icon. This is what you're running in your service provider infrastructure somewhere. Created companies in service provider console. And we are going to have these backup and replication servers of the customer connect to and deliver monitoring and reporting data to the service provider console. So big picture, this is the use case. Combination of Veeam backup for AWS in this example, integrated with Veeam backup and replication through the plugin architecture, and connected to the service provider console to deliver the data through these tools. And to me, these are required tools that you will leverage as a service provider to enable and deliver the service. All right, I've just jumped to the next slide, which shows the same thing, but in Azure. And you can see our Azure workloads on the left. We're using subscriptions here in our terminology, but we're still using our cloud native Veeam backup tool. Happen to be writing our data to blob. Moving over to the right of our diagram, we're still connected to Veeam backup and replication and the service provider console in the same way. So Veeam has built our software to operate like this. We did this very much on purpose as a strategy to get to the point we're at today with this particular use case. I'm going to jump back to you, Mike. Why? Why did we spend so much effort and time developing these integration and pieces?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. We look at BAS, and this is, back to the research studies, back to the marketing guide to talk about this stuff. But it's really important, right? Because a lot of these organizations, they're starting to grow, and those numbers are becoming above 30%, with an expectation of those to grow even further. We got a couple of reports that are getting ready to drop very, very soon. You may have even seen some stuff on LinkedIn from Jason Buffington and Dave Russell, kind of talking about what they found towards the end of this year and really starting to look at the growth areas. And all of these numbers are starting to generate upwards, right? So access to backups anytime, anywhere. That goes back to that third-party backup tool, right? As opposed to the native backup tools, really having the flexibility. Flexible payment options, right? Everyone's on OpEx subscription type models now. So they want their backups and their managed services to be exactly the same way. The technical experts, that's that's what you guys on the call are. So they're going to be looking to you to say, hey, I want to protect this data and I want to be able to recover this data, but we don't know how to do it. We don't have the time to do it, the resources. And on the far right here, data security. We're all talking about ransomware, cybersecurity, and all this stuff. And backup professionals, they play a huge part in that. And it may not have security in the name of backup as a service, but when you think about losing data, the first thing you think of is, oh, do I have backups? Do I have my data protected? So there's a huge play there for our service providers around data security. But really, what makes all this possible, right? So you're like, this is great. Everything's growing. I got to be able to scale. So how do I do that? And Tim touched on it on those diagrams before, but Veeam Service Provider Console came out in 2000. Well, it started a long time ago, but it was started to be called Veeam Service Provider Console in 2019. But this is really your remote monitoring and management platform to be able to run all of this stuff at scale as a service provider. And not just, oh, look, on the left-hand side, I can protect my customers' environments through one pane of glass. Like everyone has that, right? It's the differentiators with us around console. It's really adding in those backup services, the back office stuff, right? The the onboarding, the billing, the licensing, that self-service. You guys run VMware. Self-service is huge. You're running you're running VCD. You got to be able to protect all that stuff. But we also know service providers build out a lot of their own stuff, right? So APIs, Veeam is huge on APIs, and everyone knows that. And on the call, we have service providers that integrate our technology into a host of different workflows and platforms and all the stuff that they've built even before Veeam had any of this stuff, right? So we really try to keep those the relationship steady with everyone just by being able to provide those APIs for you. But what we want to talk about, and it's in teal at the bottom, I guess that's a teal color, maybe a seafoam green, I don't know. Cloud workloads, right? So we want to talk about how Veeam Service Provider Console integrates with public cloud data protection, right? So you can see the nifty graphics on the screen here really playing into those workloads that are in AWS and Amazon. And you'll see the Veeam backup and replication icons here. And that's on purpose, right? Because VBR does play a huge part in that. And Tim, I'm gonna kind of give this one over to you because I don't want to get too far out of my tech wheelhouse.
Sure, thanks, Mike. Yeah, we built this slide for you all to try to visualize another way that the service provider console, which is our kind of fidget spinner green pit kind of thing, is connected to our customer backup and replication environments. So we've got service provider console in the middle, connected to backup and replication servers. And again, those backup and replication servers are integrated with our public cloud tooling. And it's as a big family that these systems work together. And we're going to demonstrate kind of the end-to-end leveraging of these tools here in a few minutes. All right, so I'm going to jump to the next piece to chat about, and this is the VBR piece. So if previously we were thinking about service provider console as a multi-tenant tool for you, this kind of single pane of glass target from us, these customer backup and replication servers are probably pretty familiar to you. These are the things that are standard across all of our use cases, some sort of interaction with VBR. As part of the integration with these public cloud tools, we'll be able to control and monitor their jobs and policies. We'll be able to view their backup data through external repositories. And all that information, for like the 5th time, but I'll probably do it 5 more, all of this information reports up to the Veeam Service Provider Console across the entire customer base. Trying to drill down again into these public cloud workloads. I'm jumping for joy, I'm almost to demo time. These are the tools that provide the real data protection. Veeam Backup for Azure, Veeam Backup for AWS. They're cloud native Linux appliances. They have native APIs. And of course, they're doing this traditional backup work and recovery work. All right. So if that's a representation of the 3 main pieces of our use case, service provider console, backup and replication, public cloud pieces, let's flip to the demo. I'm just going to change my screen here. And hopefully, Mike, you can confirm for me that you see my remote desktop.
I see it, man.
Okay. All right. You've already seen the screen. This is the same appliance or workload that I used for my overview slide earlier. Let's just walk through it real quick. I'm going to go in reverse order of the way we just explained it. Right, so here's our on-the-ground tool to perform backups in AWS. It's delivered as a web interface. You can see we've got some easy options here on the left and a config in the top right. So real quick, I can see the resources in my Amazon environment. Hey, it's my lab, it's lightweight here, but this represents what you would see in any customer world. EC2 instances, RDS instances, and EFS, I guess they're shares. In the policy section, I'm able to create and manage backup policies. I'm able to pick workloads to cover in these backups. You can see this here in the bottom left. I'm able to see a history of that policy and some additional configuration pieces. Am I replicating data? Am I moving things to archive? This is specific to Amazon. Right. Finally, on this page, I'm able to see the things that I've protected and stored in my S3 bucket in this case. Real quick, of course, we've got a simple configuration wizard. Probably looks very similar to you if you've used Service Provider Console or any of the other public cloud tools. Here we've got a really quick, easy way to identify the things you need to set up in order to do a backup. You know, these are the things to consider for your customer. Oh, you're going to need some sort of access credentialing. Oh, we'll need to set up some workers who are actually going to perform backup and restore tasks, and a repository to store that data. Okay, do those things. 3, you'll be able to create a policy. All right. Just for giggles, here's Azure. Looks very similar. Set up in a very similar way, just with Azure words and Azure context. So if these are the public cloud tools where you create individual policies to really back up workloads, I want to show you the backup and replication integration. Now, I'm going to start from the place where we would connect to or add an AWS or Azure appliance. We go to the backup infrastructure section. We look at, in our managed server list, AWS area, if you have this existing, or Azure area. These are the appliance connections. These are the web UIs that we were just looking at. So I've set up each of these with my specific credentials to connect to the public cloud, and then subsequently connect to this particular appliance. This is a wizard-driven process. If I were to, for example, attempt to add an appliance, you get a wizard that looks like this. So just take note of a couple options here. You can connect to an existing appliance that might be out there in Azure in this case, or deploy a new one. And as you attempt to connect or deploy, you'll drive through this wizard, choose your access account to talk to the public cloud, choose your place where your machine lives or will live, this particular appliance. And subsequently we'll leverage some credentials to connect to it directly, and we'll understand the repository information that was built out there. And we do all that work, all this integration, so that nice and easy back at our home screen, we can see those jobs and policies and manipulate them. So what I'm able to do here is look at a particular policy, and I can choose to run it. All from here, all from VBR. This is part of the plugin integration. I'm also able to see in my external repository area all of these items that I've backed up, things that are stored out there in the public cloud areas comprehensively. Now, in my previous section, we described 3 pieces: the public cloud workloads, backup and replication, and service provider console. So let's go see what we can see in today's service provider console. So here I am in my lab environment as well. I'm looking at a company that I created. And just real quick, I'll show that I've added a service provider with this particular company credentials. So I'm connected to a service provider. I'm running the management agent for service provider console, and I'm delivering that information that we talked about up to the service provider console so that me as a service provider, I can manage effectively and efficiently and provide information to my my leadership and my customer. So here's my particular company. I've already zoomed in on it up here in the top left. I'm filtering just to see this environment. If I go to backup jobs, I can see by navigating to the public cloud in a sub tab that I can see these policies that we were just looking at. And I can see the protected data by filtering to only cloud information. I can see the representations of this backed up data. I can see how many restore points I have. I can see the size if I click in and drill in further. So the information is here. But I'm going to do a little compare and contrast for the group. We're all friends here. It's getting late in the year. We've got some new versions coming out. I just want to point out something in version 6. This is today's service provider console that you might have noticed on this screen. While I can look at my jobs, I can't really manipulate them. There's no start, stop, retry, like I do get in my virtual infrastructure tab. These are regular VMware jobs in my case, and you can see how we can interact with them here. All right, just a little teaser for later. Okay, so what I've done is I've shown you the 3 tools, the 3 main pieces that service providers use to deliver this use case, public cloud data protection as a service for our providers. I jump back to the slideshow for a little bit and talk about some resources that Mike and I put forward for you as a group so that you can just be as educated as possible. Mike, you want to just run through a couple of these real quick?
Yeah, so thanks for showing the demo there, Tim, of all the different resources that it does take to put together a public cloud data protection offering. But, you know, when you look, we went through a lot of information just there, but you're probably asking yourself, like, where do I find more information, right? So we do have a host of technical resources available to everyone, and one that just kind of dropped very recently is our use case best practice guide. So that jumps into public cloud data protection, walks through the as a service architecture, talks a little bit about the value proposition around the use case itself to, you know, help you when you're talking to your customers that are out there that have these workloads in the cloud. And of course, our help center, right? Moving to the right, our technical docs, those are all free to everyone. Anybody, not even a Veeam customer or a Veeam partner, can go into the help center and get technical information on our products. We don't hide anything. It's out there, very comprehensive. So especially for our service providers, because it really gets into, you know, when you're building out these as a service offerings, the different tooling that you would need, including our API sets and all of that. And then Pro Partner Portal, our tech hub that's out there. So I know as a partner, you're in Pro Partner a lot. Sometimes I've even heard that some of our partners rely completely on Pro Partner Portal and really don't go anywhere near the web. So we've added the Tech Hub, and in the Tech Hub, you'll find documentation, those use case best practices guides. They're going to be in there as well, how-to videos under the use cases that you need. So super comprehensive there. And then our R&D Tech Forum, a place where you can go to share, you know, your experiences with the technology, talk to your peers that are out there, your Veeam peers that are out there. Product management, they monitor this very, very closely and get answers to the things that you need. And I know, Tim, you're in the forums a lot too.
Yeah, honestly, for all the attendees and to answer the question, I use all of these tools every day. The one I'd call out for special mention is the Pro Partner Tech Hub area. This is where you will find the quick start guides that we mentioned. These quick start guides have diagrams and a step-by-step process to deliver this as a service, not just with one Veeam backup and AWS implementation, but with the connectivity to VBR and all of the comprehensive service provider console info. And additionally, some day two operations advice. So Pro Partner Portal, leverage these quick start guides. They're very, very, very good.
Cool. All right, so let's want to move into the fun stuff.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. All right, so I know Tim just made had a really good demo around V6 of Veeam Service Provider Console, and then talked a lot about some of the functionality that will be coming very, very soon. So we do want to give you a little bit of a sneak peek into what is coming in version 7 of Veeam Service Provider Console, specifically around protecting those public cloud workloads. So Tim, I'm going to let you get into the environment and show a little bit of peel back the curtain a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, I love the danger zone analogy. I can tell from the webinar, view that I have. Everyone is looking at their screen right now. I'm kind of nervous. Okay, so I'm nervous. I want the audience to know because I am so excited. We all are so excited with what we're doing in Console V7. Lots of you have had roadmap sessions. Maybe you heard some of this stuff at VeeamON. Maybe you saw some of this content in other Veeam presentations. Or maybe you were participating in the Console V7 beta. So before I show anything or move on to the next slide, just a quick plug for the beta. Or actually, you know what? I'd like to go to this next slide.
Yeah.
We in July delivered a beta where we were able to leverage some of these new features. And just as a word of encouragement for the audience, please participate in the beta. Ask your SE or SA or a sales representative for access. Maybe in the future, as we're really close to our next versions, but leveraging the beta would be an opportunity to see this new stuff way ahead of the time, like the webinar. So in our Console V7 beta, we have some integration with Veeam Backup for AWS. We're implementing a whole new strategy. This is in addition to all of the stuff we talked about today. All of the technical implementation for a traditional hybrid cloud customer of yours, leveraging VBR, that all stays. And what we are doing is we are adding a new way to do business with your customers, one that's more cloud native, quite frankly. And so the bullet points I'm going to talk through briefly are deployment of Veeam Backup appliances, management of these appliances, and job management, all in the next version of Service Provider Console. So what we're going to do is introduce comprehensive Veeam Backup appliance for AWS and Azure, management and deployment through the Veeam Service Provider Console, through the web page. This is going to enable your customers to have a ton of self-service options and reporting and metrics and just better usability for this kind of public cloud data protection. The graphics on screen, even though they're very simple, they completely describe how we're going to do this technically. I said it 5 times or 8 times in the webinar. The Veeam Backup for AWS and Azure. What is the Veeam software that they integrate directly with? It's backup and replication. And so the paradigm we're going to change is we're going to leverage your Cloud Connect server for that integration. Your Cloud Connect server will be the new VBR. It integrates with these public cloud tools. So how does it look? In Service Provider Console, there'll be a new plugin. Might have had a question about this in the Q&A. In the plugin in Veeam Service Provider Console, you'll be able to run through this wizard. Hey, it looks just like the wizard I showed in my other demo from VBR, where you can deploy or connect to an appliance. This is the same wizard, just presented in the web. In AWS, or we're going to supply centralized management for these jobs that are created through those appliances and for the existing ones we have already. You can see on the screen that we've added these job options: start, stop, and even edit and create. Now, what I really love about this in Console 7 is this is the first version of the Veeam Service Provider Console where we are introducing job creation in the console. Happens to be coming both for public cloud workloads and for Microsoft 365. Okay, so cool. We're going to have some job management right through Service Provider Console's UI. We'll be able to deploy those appliances by adding the same credentials. These credentials just get plumbed into Veeam Cloud Connect in the background, exactly like you'd expect in today's world. And finally, when we go and actually deploy these appliances, you'll get all this status and monitoring of the appliance deployment, but we also have alarms, comprehensive alarms, reports, and so on and so forth for all of this public cloud data protection use case. So I am thrilled, Mike, that we have continued to put in so much effort to try to do this right on the first go around in a whole new way. And again, to me, this is comprehensive. So
yeah, it's huge, and it's huge that we're streamlining everything without the use of that dedicated VBR and just allowing our service providers to scale, right, with the functions that they can do through Service Provider Console. And that's really, at the end of the day, the remote monitoring, the remote management piece is where it's coming into play for this one. For sure, yeah, totally agree.
Awesome. Well, that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you so much to the attendees today and attendees in the future. Both Mike and I's contact information was way back there on the intro slide. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, we were both interested in hearing from you. We're going to pause for some Q&A, and I've got one question. I might have addressed it before, so I'll just kind of read it out, and I'll try to talk through it as best as I can. So earlier in my first demo, I was walking through some of the compare and contrast between old and new Service Provider Console. And the question was, in the current version, there's really no visibility on scale or at scale. And so I believe I understand the question correctly. So to me, this new implementation will be how we observe this at scale, both in a hybrid cloud environment or a cloud native environment. We have another question coming in that asks about the status of Veeam for Google. And what are some of the roadblocks there? All right, so I'll do my best to address this the right way. Today, if you look at the versions of Veeam Backup for Public Cloud, So Azure, AWS, and Google. I believe we're at version 5 of AWS, 4
Hmm.
Azure, and 3 Google. Does that sound right, Mike?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly.
So if you think about that numbering I just laid out, it would be indicative that Google is just a little bit behind from Veeam's development standpoint. We did the others first. We did Amazon first, later Azure, later Google. For Veeam, it's a big learning path.
Yeah, and that's also because of the market share too, Tim. There's a AWS leads in market share, right behind it Microsoft Azure and then Google Cloud too. So we really want to support those environments that those customers are going to as well too, right? Because we're more than likely you're going to get customers that are going to be in AWS or Microsoft Azure, maybe both. But to Tim's point, Google's coming and it's not far behind. It's going to be integrated the same exact way that these offerings for AWS and Azure are too, as well.
Yeah, okay. So that just might be a matter of time thing. If you'd like to talk more about that, if you need more information regarding our targets for Google, again, please reach out directly. We will either discuss with you directly or we can get you in touch with the appropriate folks.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you have a good opportunity or maybe that's something you focus on. We'd really like to know that. All right. Mike, I think we're out of questions. I'd like to thank you directly, Mike, for
Yeah,
doing this
man.
webinar with me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you as well. But I did want to also mention that with the launch of V12 platform, console version 7, all this stuff, we're going to be having a bunch of training modules and partner briefings and all of this other great stuff that's going to be scheduled to be coming up in the very near future. So make sure you keep an eye out in your inbox for all of that goodness that's going to be coming very, very soon for everything. Um, Getting ahead of it is the best action just because, you can learn about it, test out the beta, get everything ready in the environment. So when this does GA, you'll be ready. So yeah. All right,
Oh,
cool. So
we got one more question. We won't address this
okay.
directly, but please reach out to one of us. The question is, of course, what's the release target for V12? Please reach out via email directly and we'll have a conversation with you. Thanks.
Yeah. Cool. All right, so we'll wrap it up. Thank you everyone for attending. Tim, thanks, man. This has been great. And yeah, we'll talk to everyone very, very soon.